Have you ever wondered where civilization began? Not in Egypt, not in Greece, but in a mysterious land called Mesopotamia. Over 5,000 years ago, in the flat sun baked plains between the Tigris and Euphrates rivers, humans made choices that changed the world forever. They planted seeds instead of chasing herds, built walls instead of wandering in tents, and invented writing to tell their stories. Mesopotamia was the workshop of early cities, the birthplace of law, and the cradle of the written word. It was home to kings and scholars, farmers and priests, merchants and warriors. Every fact we record, every law we enforce, every city we build bears its silent imprint. We'll walk through dusty streets of Uruk, climb the steps of ziggurats, and examine clay tablets inscribed with the first cuneiform signs. We'll meet the Sumerians, Akkadians, Babylonians, and Assyrians. We'll uncover their inventions, their gods, their struggles, and their enduring legacy. By the end, you'll see that Mesopotamia is not just ancient history, but the prologue to our own story, a testament to human ingenuity, cooperation, and the relentless drive to leave a mark on the world. Chapter 1: Geography and the Dawn of Settlements. Mesopotamia literally means land between rivers. The Tigris and the Euphrates carved their paths through modern-day Iraq, Syria, and southeastern Turkey, creating a fertile ribbon of alluvial soil in an otherwise arid region. Before the invention of agriculture, Mesopotamia's people were hunter-gatherers, following seasonal migrations of gazelle and wild cattle. Around 10,000 BCE, as global climates warmed, wild grasses began to flourish in the floodplains. That abundance beckoned human groups to stay. The first farmers encountered periodic floods that both nourished and threatened. Learning to harness the rivers meant life or death, so they dug canals and built earthen embankments. These engineering experiments, initially crude, laid the foundations for irrigation networks that would one day feed hundreds of thousands. Villages took root where fresh water was accessible. Clay brick houses replaced tents. Pottery vessels appeared, marking a new era of storage and surplus. Surpluses allowed some people to specialize as toolmakers, weavers, and traders instead of spending every hour in the fields. By 6000 BCE, dozens of small villages lined the river banks. Each had its own rituals and local deity, but they shared a common language, family, and material culture. They traded obsidian for blades and shells for ornaments, linking communities across hundreds of miles. As populations grew, competition for water and arable land intensified, spurring the first forms of communal decision-making. Elders and emerging chiefs negotiated water rights, settled disputes, and organized large-scale work parties to maintain canals and dikes. These collective efforts forged a sense of identity stronger than kinship alone. The impulse to cooperate on grand projects, temples, city walls, dikes, would define Mesopotamian politics for millennia. Chapter 2: The Rise of Sumer and the First Cities. By 4000 BCE, southern Mesopotamia, later called Sumer, burst forth with its first true cities. Uruk, Eridu, and Ur rose from the marshy delta like clumps of clay bricks crowned with temples. Uruk, the largest, may have housed 50,000 souls at its height. Walking Uruk's broad avenues, you would pass bustling bazaars brimming with grain, pottery, and textiles dyed in vivid reds from imported insects. You'd glimpse massive ziggurats, step pyramids of mud brick rising toward the heavens. Priests presided over rituals atop these platforms, mediating between citizens and the divine. City administrations employed scores of scribes to record every transaction and tally every bushel of grain. Writing began as a means of accounting, but quickly evolved into a tool for myth-making, law-giving, and diplomacy. Meanwhile, workshops hummed with artisans crafting copper tools, woolen garments, and alabaster figurines. Uruk's political power radiated outward, founding colonies as far as northern Syria and the Iranian plateau. These trading outposts spread Sumerian language and customs, creating a network of interlinked urban centers. Life in the city was rigidly stratified. Nobles and priests enjoyed fine houses with courtyards and private wells. Merchants and artisans lived in comfortable but smaller dwellings. Laborers and slaves occupied crowded quarters near the city gates. Even so, every resident invested in the city's grandeur, zestfully celebrating religious festivals, communal feasts, and the king's triumphs. Eridu, mythically regarded as the first city ever founded by gods, retained its prestige through the early dynastic period. Its temple dedicated to Enki, god of water, symbolized humanity's reliance on the irrigation networks that Enki himself was believed to have taught people to build. By 2900 BCE, Sumerian kingship had become firmly institutionalized. City-states vied for supremacy, forging alliances and waging wars, but they also shared cultural traditions, the same pantheon of gods, the same cuneiform script, and the same calendar of festivals. Chapter 3: Invention of Writing and Record Keeping. Perhaps the most revolutionary Mesopotamian invention was writing. Before cuneiform, memory and oral tradition preserved history. Around 3200 BCE, Sumerian accountants developed a pictographic system to track grain and livestock. They pressed reed styluses into soft clay tablets, creating wedge-shaped impressions. Over centuries, pictographs evolved into abstract signs that conveyed sounds and ideas. Cuneiform became a flexible script, capable of expressing everything from legal codes to epic poetry. The administrative impulse remained the chief driver. Temples and palaces kept massive archives of economic records, sheep counts, beer rations, tax receipts. Standardized lists, lexical series, and school exercises filled libraries in every major center. But writing also became a means of storytelling. The elite of Uruk commissioned scribes to compose the Epic of Gilgamesh, a sweeping narrative that blended myth, history, and philosophy. Gilgamesh's search for immortality, only to learn that human deeds and legacies matter most, remains deeply resonant. Legal writing flourished too. At Ur, we find early codes ordering compensation for damages and prescribing punishments. By the time of Hammurabi, 18th century BCE, law codes were carved in stone and displayed in public squares, proclaiming rights and responsibilities to all literate and illiterate alike. Scholars divided cuneiform texts into genres: administrative, legal, literary, scientific, and divinatory. They developed commentaries and glossaries, creating an intellectual tradition that would last until the first centuries CE. Cuneiform's diffusion extended far beyond Sumer. Akkadians, Babylonians, Elamites, Hittites, and Persians adopted it, adapting the script to their own languages. For 3,000 years, from the mid-4th millennium BCE to the 1st century CE, cuneiform served as the lingua franca of the ancient Near East. Chapter 4: Empires of Conquest. Akkad, Babylon, and Assyria. While city-states dominated Sumer's early dynastic era, a new force arose around 2334 BCE: Sargon of Akkad. Sargon's father may have been a gardener, his mother a temple priestess. By seizing power in Kish and Uruk, he launched military campaigns that united Sumerian cities under his rule. Akkad, his capital, became the first true empire, a polity extending from southern Mesopotamia to the Mediterranean coast. Sargon's administrators imposed standardized weights and measures, collected tribute, and installed loyal governors. His grandson Naram-Sin even declared himself divine, a clear marker of evolving royal ideology. Akkad eventually fractured under pressure from Gutian invaders, but imperial models endured. In the late 3rd millennium, the third dynasty of Ur revived Sumerian ascendancy in what scholars call the Ur-III period. Efficient bureaucracy reached its peak, with provincial scribes reporting directly to the king. A few centuries later, Babylon rose under Amorite rulers. Hammurabi 1792 to 1750 BCE consolidated southern Mesopotamia through both diplomacy and war. His famous code, inscribed on a 7-foot basalt stele, proclaimed that justice must protect the weak and punish the strong equally. In the north, Assyria emerged along the upper Tigris. Assyrian kings Tiglath-Pileser, Shalmaneser, Sargon II, Sennacherib, and Ashurbanipal created a war machine powered by chariots, siege engines, and iron weapons. Their walls of Nineveh and Nimrud bristled with towers and gates, while reliefs boasted graphic scenes of conquest and deportation. Though Assyria was ruthless, it also patronized scholarship. Ashurbanipal's library in Nineveh housed over 30,000 tablets, literature, scientific texts, and diplomatic correspondence. This archive, buried after the city's fall in 612 BCE, would provide modern scholars with a wealth of knowledge about ancient Mesopotamia. Chapter 5: Science, Technology, and Innovation. Mesopotamians tackled practical problems with creative solutions, laying foundations for modern science and engineering. They invented a sexagesimal base 60 number system likely to facilitate complex calculations for astronomy and taxation. From that system comes our 60-minute hour and 360-degree circle. They divided the day into two 12-hour periods and tracked lunar months, creating a lunisolar calendar with intercalary months to reconcile agricultural seasons. Astronomers recorded planetary movements in systematic observations called Enuma, Anu, Enlil. They predicted lunar eclipses and developed tables to guide farmers and priests. Their data would later inspire Greek astronomers and, through the Islamic Golden Age, medieval European thinkers. Engineering feats included massive irrigation networks of canals, dams, and reservoirs. Sumerian and Babylonian engineers designed regulators to manage floods and distribute water evenly. When fields grew saline, they experimented with crop rotation and salt-tolerant grains. Architecture saw innovations in vaulting and buttressing. Ziggurats provided elevated platforms for temples, while city walls, made of mud brick, demonstrated an understanding of form and function in defense. Public buildings featured bent axis approaches, guiding worshippers through ritual spaces in choreographed sequences. In medicine, practitioners combined herbal remedies, surgical techniques, and ritual incantations. Texts like the Diagnostic Handbook classified diseases and suggested treatments ranging from plant extracts to behavioral therapies. Some prescriptions, such as willow bark for pain, anticipated later pharmacology. Mathematicians solved quadratic equations, calculated areas and volumes of fields and granaries, and developed algorithms for dividing debts among parties. Their work appeared in clay tablets still legible today, revealing a sophistication that challenges any notion of primitive antiquity. Chapter 6: Daily Life, Society, and Culture. Most Mesopotamians were farmers, planting barley and wheat in spring and harvesting in summer. Their days began before dawn, tending fields or guiding irrigation channels. When not working the land, they crafted pottery, wove textiles, and tended livestock. Houses were built of sun-dried brick, clustered around central courtyards. Basic homes had separate rooms for cooking, sleeping, and storage. Wealthier families enjoyed private wells, decorated walls, and tiled floors. Every home had a small shrine honoring the household deity. Families were patriarchal, but women held economic and religious roles. They managed households, supervised servants, and could own property. Elite women served as priestesses and even minted their own cylinder seals, a personal signature pressed into wet clay. Education took place in scribal schools called edubas. Boys, sometimes girls in elite families, learned to copy lexical lists, master cuneiform signs, and calculate grain rations. Advanced pupils studied astronomy, mathematics, and divination, preparing them for roles in temple or palace libraries. Commerce thrived on riverine and overland networks. Reed boats ferried loads of grain and textiles downriver, while caravans transported metals, timber, and precious stones from distant lands. Markets buzzed with traders from Elam, Anatolia, and the Indus Valley. Social status was clearly defined. At the top sat the king, supported by nobles and high priests. Below them were merchants, artisans, and farmers. Slaves, often war captives or debtors, performed labor in fields, households, and temples. Yet mobility existed. A successful merchant could rise in wealth and influence. Artisans produced jewelry of lapis lazuli, carnelian, and gold, as well as cylinder seals bearing intricate mythological scenes. Musicians played lyres and drums at festivals and feasts. Poets composed hymns to gods and laments for fallen cities. Every element of daily life brimmed with ritual significance. Chapter 7: Religion, Myth, and Cosmology. Religion permeated Mesopotamian consciousness. They believed the cosmos was a flat disk surrounded by water, with the underworld below and the heavens above. Human beings existed to serve the gods, creating offerings, building temples, and reciting prayers. Each city's patron deity dominated local life. In Ur, Nana the moon god commanded respect. In Uruk, Inanna the goddess of love and war reigned supreme. In Eridu, Enki presided over water and wisdom. Temples, often called houses of the gods, served as economic centers, redistributing goods and employing large workforces. Priests and priestesses performed daily rites, from pouring libations to dressing cult statues. Festivals punctuated the year. The New Year's Akitu festival reenacted the god Marduk's victory over chaos. The sacred marriage ritual symbolically united the king and goddess to ensure fertility and order. Mythic narratives explained cosmic origins and human responsibilities. The Enuma Elish described creation as the triumph of Marduk over the sea goddess Tiamat, establishing divine kingship. Adapa's tale punished a mortal sage for refusing sacred food, explaining why humans are mortal. Divination was central to decision-making. Haruspices read entrails, astrologers interpreted omens in bird flights or celestial phenomena. Every military campaign, marriage contract, and building project began with ritual consultations to secure divine favor. Funerary customs varied over time. Early burials included grave goods, bowls, beads, and figurines to accompany the deceased in the underworld. Later, ancestral worship emerged in family shrines, recalling departed kin and seeking their guidance. Chapter 8: Decline, Legacy, and Modern Discoveries. Despite its innovations, Mesopotamia was vulnerable. Soil salinization from centuries of irrigation reduced yields. Political fragmentation bred endless conflict among rival city-states and foreign invaders. By 539 BCE, Cyrus the Great of Persia absorbed Babylon, promising religious tolerance and administrative stability. Under Achaemenid rule, Mesopotamian institutions persisted, but with Greek, Median, and Persian layers added. Alexander the Great's conquests in the 330 SBCE further Hellenized the region. Over the next centuries, Mesopotamia passed through Seleucid, Parthian, and Sasanian hands before becoming part of the Islamic caliphates. Cuneiform fell silent after the 1st century CE as Aramaic and later Arabic took its place. Temples crumbled, and city mounds, tells, accumulated layers of history. Rediscovery began in the early 19th century when European travelers found mounds at Ur, Nimrud, and Nineveh. Excavators like Austin Henry Layard and Hormuzd Rassam unearthed palaces and libraries, sending artifacts to museums in London, Paris, Berlin, and Baghdad. Decipherment of cuneiform in the 1850s opened a floodgate of knowledge. Henry Rawlinson's work on the Behistun inscription, an ancient trilingual rock relief, was the Rosetta Stone of the Near East. Scholars translated thousands of tablets, reconstructing laws, treaties, letters, and myths. Today, Mesopotamia's legacy is woven into our world. We inherit its mathematics when we measure time and angles. We live under legal principles first uttered in Babylonian courts. We tell stories in the epic tradition that began in Uruk, and our cities still follow grid patterns first laid out on clay floodplains. Archaeology continues to reveal new insights. Satellite imagery maps forgotten canal networks. Digital epigraphy captures tablet texts in high resolution. Iraqi and Syrian scholars and international teams work under challenging conditions to preserve this fragile heritage for future generations. Conclusion: Mesopotamia's story is one of brilliance and hubris, innovation and decline, cooperation and conflict. It reminds us that civilization is both a miracle and a responsibility, an achievement that demands stewardship as much as creativity. As you go about your day, checking your phone for the time, reading the news, governing your communities, pause to recognize the invisible foundations laid in the land between rivers. Mesopotamia is not merely an artifact of the past, it is the first chapter of our shared human saga, an enduring testament to what we can achieve when we harness nature, record our thoughts, and unite in cities that pulse with life. May its lessons guide us as we face the challenges of our own age, reminding us that progress is hard won, that knowledge must be passed on, and that every generation bears responsibility for the legacy it leaves behind.